He rode straight into the heart of enemy territory. No soldiers, no weapons, just a letter, and unshakable resolve. What she said to the feared Comanche chief would decide the fate of hundreds. And yet, he didn't even raise his voice. Why? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty settlement of San Angelo in the summer of 1873. The small frontier town sat precariously on the edge of Comanche territory, a fragile outpost of civilization where tension hung in the air like the oppressive heat. Catherine Morgan stood on the wooden porch of her late father's general store, her striking green eyes scanning the horizon with a mixture of determination and apprehension. At 24 years old, she had inherited more than just a business when her father passed 6 months ago. She had inherited his stubbornness, his sense of justice, and his belief that peaceful coexistence with the Comanche was not only possible, but necessary for survival. Catherine's auburn hair was pulled back in a practical bun, though a few rebellious strands had escaped to frame her sun-kissed face. She wore a simple cotton dress the color of sage, practical yet flattering on her slender frame. Her hands, calloused from hard work, gripped the porch railing as she watched a group of ranch hands ride past, their faces grim with the news they carried. Another raid, another family displaced, another step closer to all-out war. Inside the store, her younger brother Thomas was stocking shelves with supplies that had just arrived from Austin. At 17, he was eager to prove himself a man, but Catherine worried constantly about his safety and his increasingly aggressive stance toward the Comanche. Their father had taught them both to see the native people as human beings with legitimate grievances, but Thomas had hardened after their father's death, blaming the local tribe for the instability that had contributed to the old man's fatal heart attack. Catherine descended the steps and walked purposefully down the main street, her boots creating small clouds of dust with each step. She passed the blacksmith's shop, where the rhythmic clanging of hammer on anvil provided a steady soundtrack to frontier life. She nodded politely to Mrs. Henderson, who was sweeping her porch, and continued toward the marshal's office at the far end of town. Marshal Henry Wade was a weathered man in his 50s, with a salt and pepper mustache and eyes that had seen too much violence. He looked up from his desk as Catherine entered, removing his hat in a gesture of respect that had become rare in these harsh times. The marshal had been her father's friend, and had promised to look after his children, though Catherine's independent spirit made such protection largely unnecessary. "Miss Catherine," he said, his voice gravelly from years of tobacco and desert dust, "I suppose you've heard about the Miller Ranch." Catherine nodded, her expression serious. "3 families driven off their land in 2 weeks, Marshal. This cannot continue. Someone needs to speak with Chief Ironheart before this situation escalates beyond control." The marshal's weathered face creased with concern as he leaned back in his chair, which protested with a sharp creak. "Now, Catherine, you know I respected your father more than any man in this territory, but what you're suggesting is dangerous. Ironheart isn't known for his patience with white settlers, especially not after what happened at the reservation last month." Catherine's jaw tightened at the mention of the reservation incident. A group of drunken soldiers had attacked several Comanche women gathering water near the boundary, an atrocity that had gone unpunished by the territorial authorities. She understood the chief's anger, even if she couldn't condone the retaliatory raids. "That's exactly why someone needs to speak with him, Marshal. Someone who isn't wearing a uniform or carrying the stain of the Army's crimes. My father traded with Ironheart's people for years. They respected him. Perhaps they'll extend that respect to his daughter." Marshal Wade stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. Outside, the town continued its daily rhythm, oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. "Your father was a remarkable man, Catherine, but he was also a man. Ironheart is old-fashioned in his views. He might not take kindly to a woman presuming to speak for the settlers, no matter whose daughter she is. Then he'll have to adjust his expectations," Catherine replied, her voice firm but not disrespectful. "Because I'm going to ride out to his camp tomorrow morning, with or without your blessing. I'd prefer to go with your support and perhaps a letter of safe passage, but I'll go regardless." The marshal turned to face her, studying her determined expression. He saw echoes of her father in the set of her jaw, in the unwavering conviction in her eyes. With a heavy sigh, he moved to his desk and began writing on a piece of official letterhead. "You're as stubborn as he was. I'll give you that. I'll write you a letter, though I can't guarantee it'll do any good. And Catherine, take someone with you. Don't ride out there alone." Catherine accepted the letter with a grateful nod. "Thank you, Marshal. And I won't be alone. I'm taking Samuel Cooper with me. He's level-headed and he knows the territory." Samuel Cooper was the son of the local stable owner, a quiet young man of 26 who had grown up alongside Catherine. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sandy hair and honest brown eyes that reflected a gentle nature uncommon in the harsh frontier. Samuel had been sweet on Catherine since they were children, though he had never spoken of his feelings, sensing that her independent spirit might view such declarations as attempts to cage her freedom. The next morning arrived with a spectacular sunrise that painted the Texas sky in shades of crimson and gold. Catherine had dressed practically in riding trousers and a loose shirt, both borrowed from her brother's wardrobe, with a wide-brimmed hat to shield her face from the relentless sun. She carried no weapons except a small knife for practical purposes, a deliberate choice to demonstrate her peaceful intentions. Samuel was waiting at the stable with 2 horses already saddled and provisions for the journey packed in leather saddlebags. His face showed concern, but also admiration for Catherine's courage. "Are you certain about this, Catherine? We could wait and see if the territorial governor sends someone to negotiate." Catherine mounted her horse with practiced ease, settling into the saddle with the confidence of someone who had been riding since childhood. "The territorial governor doesn't care about San Angelo or the people who live here, Samuel. By the time he acts, if he acts at all, dozens more families will have been displaced and blood will have been shed on both sides. No, this needs to happen now, and it needs to come from someone who actually lives here and understands what's at stake." They rode out as the sun climbed higher, following a trail that led northwest into the rolling hills and grasslands that marked the edge of Comanche territory. The landscape was beautiful in its harsh way, with wildflowers dotting the prairie and hawks circling lazily overhead. Catherine used the time to organize her thoughts, rehearsing what she would say to Chief Ironheart, considering how to frame her arguments in a way that might resonate with a man who had every reason to distrust her people. By early afternoon, they spotted signs of the Comanche camp, smoke rising from cooking fires, horses grazing in a nearby meadow, and the distinctive teepees arranged in a careful pattern. As they drew closer, Catherine's heart began to pound, though she refused to let fear show on her face. Samuel moved his horse closer to hers, a protective gesture that she appreciated even as she knew it would make little difference if the Comanche chose to view them as enemies. They were intercepted by 3 mounted warriors before they reached the camp's perimeter. The warriors were young, powerfully built, with faces painted for war and weapons ready. The leader spoke sharply in the Comanche language, his tone unmistakably hostile. Catherine raised her hands slowly, palms out, in the universal gesture of peace. "I am Catherine Morgan, daughter of Henry Morgan, who traded with your people. I come to speak with Chief Ironheart. I carry a letter from our marshal, and I mean no harm to anyone here." The young warrior's eyes narrowed as he studied Catherine and Samuel with undisguised suspicion. He exchanged rapid words with his companions before gesturing sharply for them to dismount. Catherine complied immediately, her movement slow and deliberate to avoid any action that might be interpreted as threatening. Samuel followed her lead, though his jaw was clenched with tension. The warriors confiscated their horses and led them on foot toward the camp, their hands hovering near their weapons throughout the short walk. The Comanche encampment was larger than Catherine had anticipated, with perhaps 60 teepees arranged in concentric circles around a central gathering area. Women tended cooking fires, while children played nearby, their games stopping abruptly as the white visitors were escorted through. Catherine felt the weight of dozens of hostile stares, heard the angry murmurs that followed in their wake. She kept her head high but her expression respectful, understanding that any sign of arrogance or fear could prove fatal. They were brought to the largest teepee at the camp center, where the young warrior spoke briefly with an older man standing guard. Moments later, they were ushered inside, and Catherine found herself face to face with Chief Ironheart. The name suited him perfectly. He was a man perhaps in his mid-40s, though the hard lines of his face and the steel in his dark eyes made age difficult to determine. His presence filled the space with an almost tangible authority. He sat cross-legged on a buffalo hide, his posture relaxed but his gaze sharp and penetrating. His long black hair was streaked with silver and adorned with eagle feathers that denoted his status. Scars on his chest and arms told stories of countless battles survived. The chief's eyes moved from Samuel to Catherine, lingering on her with an expression that revealed nothing of his thoughts. When he spoke, his English was heavily accented but clear, evidence of years of necessary interaction with the white settlers who had invaded his people's lands. "You are the daughter of the traitor Morgan. I remember your father. He was less dishonest than most of your people. That does not explain why you come here now, when my warriors prepare for war." Catherine stepped forward, ignoring the warning hiss from one of the guards. She met Ironheart's gaze directly, showing respect but not submission. "Chief Ironheart, I come because war will destroy us all, not just my people but yours as well. The army will send soldiers more than you can imagine, and they will not distinguish between those who raided the ranches and the innocent members of your tribe. Women and children will suffer. Elders will die. Your entire way of life will be crushed under their boots." Ironheart's expression remained impassive, though something flickered in his eyes at the mention of women and children. "Your people have already destroyed our way of life. The buffalo are disappearing, hunted nearly to extinction by white men who take only the hides and leave the meat to rot. The sacred lands where our ancestors are buried have been stolen, divided among settlers who know nothing of their significance. The treaties your government signed are worth less than the paper they were written on. Why should I believe that anything will change if I stop defending my people?" The chief's voice had risen slightly, though he maintained his seated position and his composure. Catherine could feel the rage beneath his controlled exterior, the accumulation of decades of broken promises and injustices. She took a slow breath before responding, knowing that her next words would determine not only the outcome of this meeting, but possibly the fate of everyone in San Angelo. "You're right," she said simply, and the admission clearly surprised him. "Everything you've said is true. My people have broken every promise, violated every treaty, and treated your tribe with contempt and cruelty. I cannot change the past, Chief Ironheart, and I cannot guarantee that my government will suddenly develop honor and integrity. But I can tell you this: the families living in San Angelo are not your true enemies. They are simple people trying to survive, just like your tribe. Many of them are farmers and shopkeepers who had nothing to do with the decisions made in Washington or the crimes committed by the army." Ironheart leaned forward slightly, his intense gaze never leaving her face. "And yet they benefit from those crimes. They build their homes on land stolen from us. They profit from the buffalo they slaughter. How are they innocent?" Catherine felt Samuel shift beside her, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, but she pressed on. "They are innocent in the same way that the women and children in your camp are innocent of the raids your warriors conduct. They don't make the decisions. They don't choose the wars. They simply try to live their lives and protect their families. If you attack San Angelo, you won't be striking at the government or the army. You'll be killing people who have no power to change the system that oppresses you." For a long moment, Ironheart was silent, his fingers drumming slowly on his knee in a rhythmic pattern that seemed almost meditative. The teepee was warm, and the air was heavy with the scent of sage and smoke. Catherine could hear her own heartbeat in the silence, could feel the weight of history and hatred pressing down on this fragile moment of communication. Finally, the chief spoke, his voice quieter, but no less powerful. "Your words have some wisdom, daughter of Morgan. But words are easy. Your father brought more than words when he came to trade. He brought respect, demonstrated through actions. What actions do you offer to demonstrate the sincerity of San Angelo?" This was the moment Catherine had been preparing for, the reason she had insisted on coming despite the dangers. "I propose a meeting, Chief Ironheart, a council between representatives of your tribe and the leaders of San Angelo, mediated by someone both sides can trust. Not the army, not the territorial government, but perhaps a missionary or a trader who has dealt fairly with both communities. At this council, We can discuss specific grievances and seek specific solutions. Access to hunting grounds, compensation for damages, agreements about boundaries and resources. Ironheart's laugh was short and bitter. I have attended such councils before. They always end the same way. The white men make promises they never keep, and my people are left with less than we had before. Why should this time be different? Because this time, the alternative is annihilation for both our peoples, Catherine said, her voice firm but not aggressive. Chief Ironheart, you're a warrior and a leader. You must see the mathematics of this situation. Even if your warriors win every battle, even if you drive every settler from this region, the army will come in force. They will hunt your people across the plains. They will destroy your food supplies and poison your water sources. They will not stop until your tribe is extinct or imprisoned on a reservation where you'll slowly starve. Is that the legacy you want to leave your children? The chief's jaw tightened at the mention of his children, and Catherine saw something shift in his expression. When he next spoke, his voice carried a weight of sorrow beneath the anger. I have 3 sons and 2 daughters. My eldest son, Running Bear, believes we should fight to the last warrior. He says it is better to die free than to live as slaves. My youngest daughter, she is only 8 summers old. When I look at her, I wonder if she will ever know the freedom her grandparents knew, or if she is condemned to live in a cage, told when she may eat, where she may go, what she may believe. Catherine felt tears prick at her eyes but forced them back. Showing emotion now might be interpreted as weakness or manipulation. Then give her a chance, Chief Ironheart. Give all your children a chance, not surrender, not capitulation, but negotiation. Real negotiation, where both sides come to the table with genuine willingness to find solutions. I know it's asking you to trust people who have proven themselves untrustworthy, but what other option leads to survival? Ironheart stood abruptly, a movement so sudden that the guards stepped forward, hands on weapons. The chief waved them back impatiently and began to pace the confines of the teepee, his movements those of a caged predator. Catherine and Samuel remained still, barely breathing, as the chief wrestled with the impossible choice before him. Minutes passed in tense silence before Ironheart stopped and fixed Catherine with a look that seemed to pierce through to her very soul. You have courage, Catherine Morgan, to come here and speak such words to my face. Your father would be proud, though perhaps he would also think you foolish. He paused, considering. I will agree to your counsel, but on conditions. First, it must be held on neutral ground, not in your town where my representatives would be vulnerable. Second, I choose who speaks for my people, and you do not question my choices. Third, if your people betray this trust, if they use this council as a trap or an opportunity for treachery, I promise you that San Angelo will burn, and every living thing within it will die. Do you accept these terms? Catherine nodded without hesitation, understanding that this was likely the only chance for peace that would be offered. I accept your terms, Chief Ironheart. The council will be held at the old trading post by Willow Creek, halfway between our territories. It's abandoned but structurally sound, and both sides can approach it safely. We'll meet 1 week from today at midday. I'll bring Marshal Wade and 3 other town leaders. You choose your representatives, and we'll come unarmed as a sign of good faith. Ironheart studied her for another long moment before giving a curt nod. 1 week. If you fail to appear, or if soldiers come instead, there will be no further opportunities for talk. Now go, before my warriors decide that your presence here is an insult that must be answered with blood. His tone wasn't entirely threatening. There was almost a note of respect in his dismissal. As Catherine and Samuel were escorted back to their horses, Catherine caught sight of a man standing near one of the outer teepees. He was younger than Ironheart, perhaps 30 years old, with the same commanding presence but a face less marked by the years. His build was powerful, his shoulders broad beneath the traditional clothing he wore. His long black hair was loose around his shoulders, and his dark eyes followed Catherine with an intensity that made her breath catch. Unlike the hostile stares from the other tribe members, his gaze held something different, curiosity perhaps, and a hint of admiration. One of the warriors noticed her glance and spoke sharply. That is Thunderstrike, the chief's war leader and nephew. He has promised to fight the white invaders until his last breath, Do not mistake his interest for friendship. The warning was clear, but Catherine couldn't help one last look back as they mounted their horses. Thunderstrike was still watching, his expression unreadable. The ride back to San Angelo was faster than the journey out, both Catherine and Samuel eager to put distance between themselves and the potential danger of the Comanche camp. Samuel, who had remained blessedly silent during the meeting, finally spoke as the town came into view on the horizon. "Catherine, you were magnificent in there. I've never seen anyone stand up to that kind of pressure with such composure." "Your father would indeed be proud." Catherine smiled wearily at him. "Thank you, Samuel. I was terrified the entire time, but showing fear would have been fatal. Now comes the harder part, convincing the people of San Angelo to actually attend this council and negotiate in good faith. Many of them would prefer to fight, consequences be damned." She was proven right when they convened a town meeting that evening in the church, the only building large enough to hold the concerned citizens. The atmosphere was hostile from the start, with many ranchers and businessmen shouting over each other, demanding immediate military action rather than what they saw as appeasement of savages. Catherine stood at the front of the room beside Marshal Wade, waiting for the anger to exhaust itself before speaking. Finally, she raised her voice above the din. "Are you all finished? Because while you're shouting about pride and revenge, Chief Ironheart is preparing his warriors for war, a war that will cost lives on both sides, destroy livelihoods, and ultimately bring the full weight of the United States Army down on this entire region. Is that what you want? Do you want to see San Angelo become a battlefield?" A rancher named Douglas stood, his face red with anger. "What I want, Miss Morgan, is for those murderous heathens to be driven from land that rightfully belongs to civilized people. They've raided my ranch twice, stolen cattle, and threatened my family. You expect me to sit down and have tea with them?" Catherine met his anger with calm determination. "No, Mr. Douglas. I expect you to sit down and negotiate with them like rational human beings seeking to avoid mutual destruction. The land you claim as yours was theirs for generations before we arrived. I'm not saying that gives them the right to raid and steal, but it does mean we need to find a way to coexist rather than annihilate each other." The debate raged for hours, with Catherine and Marshal Wade gradually winning over enough support to proceed with the council. Many remained opposed, but they grudgingly agreed to give negotiation a chance before resorting to violence. Thomas, Catherine's brother, was among the skeptics, his young face twisted with resentment. "You're naive, Catherine. These people only understand strength. Father's softness toward them probably contributed to his death." Catherine felt the words like a physical blow, but refused to let her brother see how much they hurt. "Father's compassion kept this town safe for years, Thomas. It's only since his death that things have deteriorated. Think about that before you condemn his approach." The week passed in a blur of preparation. Catherine worked tirelessly to organize the council, selecting representatives who might actually negotiate in good faith rather than those seeking confrontation. She chose Marshal Wade, Reverend Matthews from the church, Dr. Harrison, who had treated both white settlers and Comanche when given the opportunity, and, surprisingly, Samuel Cooper, whose calm demeanor and genuine decency she trusted implicitly. On the morning of the council, they rode out to the old trading post under a sky-threatening rain. The building was weathered but solid, a relic from earlier days of frontier commerce. Catherine had arrived early to arrange the space, setting up a large table with chairs on both sides, ensuring everything conveyed equality and respect. The Comanche delegation arrived precisely at midday. Chief Ironheart led them, accompanied by an elderly man Catherine assumed was a spiritual advisor, a middle-aged woman whose bearing suggested high status within the tribe, and Thunderstrike, whose presence made Catherine's pulse quicken despite the gravity of the situation. Their eyes met as he entered, and she saw a flicker of something, recognition perhaps, or acknowledgement of the courage required for this moment. The negotiations began tentatively, with Marshal Wade and Chief Ironheart speaking formally about the recent tensions. The elderly Comanche advisor, who introduced himself as Walks with Wisdom, spoke eloquently about the historical grievances of his people, the systematic destruction of their way of life. Dr. Harrison responded by acknowledging these injustices, while pointing out that the current residents of San Angelo were not the architects of these policies and should not bear the full weight of punishment for them. Hours passed with slow progress. The Comanche woman, Red Morning, spoke passionately about the need for access to traditional hunting grounds and sacred sites. Reverend Matthews proposed a system of shared resources and designated areas. There were moments of heated disagreement, times when Catherine feared the whole endeavor would collapse into recriminations and threats. But each time someone would pull back from the brink, remembering what failure meant. Thunderstrike had remained largely silent, his dark eyes moving between speakers, assessing, calculating. When he finally spoke, his English was better than Catherine had expected, colored with an accent that made his deep voice even more compelling. Words are like the wind. They blow strong for a moment and then disappear. What guarantees do we have that any agreement reached here will be honored by your people? History teaches us that white promises are worthless. Catherine leaned forward, meeting his challenging gaze directly. You're right to be skeptical, Thunderstrike. I can't guarantee that everyone in San Angelo will honor what we decide here, but I can guarantee that I will spend every day working to ensure they do. I'll hold people accountable. I'll speak out against violations, and if necessary, I'll bring conflicts back to this table for resolution before they escalate to violence. That's not a perfect guarantee, but it's a sincere one. Something shifted in Thunderstrike's expression, a softening around his eyes that suggested her words had reached him. Chief Ironheart noticed the exchange and spoke quietly to his nephew in their own language. Thunderstrike responded, gesturing toward Catherine, and the chief nodded thoughtfully. As afternoon faded toward evening, they had hammered out the framework of an agreement. Specific hunting grounds would be accessible to the Comanche during certain seasons. Compensation would be paid for past damages to ranches, funded by a special tax on San Angelo businesses. A system for reporting and addressing grievances would be established, with both Catherine and Thunderstrike serving as liaisons between their communities. It wasn't perfect, and many details remained to be worked out, but it was a genuine foundation for coexistence. As the meeting concluded, and both parties prepared to depart, Thunderstrike approached Catherine while the others were distracted with final details. You are unlike any white woman I have encountered, he said quietly. Most would not have dared to come to our camp, and fewer still would have spoken so honestly to my uncle. There is strength in you, Catherine Morgan, and honor. These are qualities my people value highly. Catherine felt warmth rise to her cheeks but maintained eye contact. Your people have suffered greatly at the hands of mine, Thunderstrike. The least I can do is offer honesty and effort toward justice. I hope we can build on what was started here today. She paused, then added more softly, I hope we might continue these conversations, help bridge the gap between our communities. Thunderstrike's lips curved in the slightest of smiles, transforming his stern features into something warmer. I would like that. There is much work to be done, and it seems we are both committed to doing it. Perhaps through this work we will also come to know each other better. The weeks that followed tested every aspect of the fragile agreement. There were violations on both sides. A young Comanche warrior who raided a ranch in defiance of his chief's orders. A group of settlers who drove off a Comanche hunting party from agreed-upon territory. Each incident required Catherine and Thunderstrike to intervene, to investigate, to mediate, to hold their respective communities accountable. These crisis meetings became regular occurrences, and through them, Catherine and Thunderstrike developed first a mutual respect, then a genuine friendship, and finally something deeper that neither had anticipated. Their cultural differences remained significant, but they found common ground in their commitment to peace, their love of the land, and their recognition that the future required cooperation rather than conflict. Thomas remained hostile to the arrangement, particularly as he witnessed his sister's growing connection to the Comanche war leader. One evening he confronted her in the store after closing. People are talking, Catherine. They're saying you've become too close to those savages, that you've forgotten your own kind. And your relationship with that Thunderstrike is inappropriate. He's the enemy. Catherine's eyes flashed with anger. He's not my enemy, Thomas, and he shouldn't be yours either. We're building something important here, something that could save lives and create a genuine future for this region. As for what people say, let them talk. I'm doing what Father would have wanted, working for peace and understanding rather than hatred and violence. 6 months after the initial council, the agreement had largely held, though not without challenges. San Angelo had adapted to sharing resources with the Comanche, and while tensions remained, open warfare had been avoided. The success of the arrangement had even attracted attention from the territorial government, which sent observers to study the model for possible application elsewhere. Catherine stood once again on the porch of her father's store, but this time Thunderstrike stood beside her. Over the months of working together, their bond had deepened into love, though they had moved cautiously, aware of the complications their relationship presented. Thunderstrike had faced criticism from warriors in his tribe who saw his feelings for a white woman as betrayal. Catherine had endured whispers and occasional outright hostility from townspeople who couldn't accept the union. But they had persevered, supported by Chief Ironheart, who had come to see Catherine as a daughter of sorts, and by Marshal Wade and other progressive voices in San Angelo, who recognized that their relationship symbolized the very cooperation they were trying to build. Samuel Cooper, despite his own unrequited feelings for Catherine, had become one of their strongest supporters, understanding that Catherine's happiness mattered more than his own desires. Thunderstrike took Catherine's hand, a gesture that still drew stares from passers-by but no longer provoked open confrontation. "My uncle has given us his blessing to marry according to both our traditions," he said quietly. "He says that our union could be the bridge our peoples need, a living symbol that we are not doomed to be enemies forever. What do you say, Catherine? Will you join your life with mine, knowing the challenges we will face?" Catherine turned to face him fully, her green eyes meeting his dark ones with absolute certainty. "I would face any challenge to be with you, Thunderstrike. You've shown me that love can transcend the barriers we build between ourselves, that understanding is possible even across great divides. Yes, I will marry you, and together we'll continue the work we've started." Their wedding, held at the trading post where the first council had taken place, brought together members of both communities in an unprecedented celebration. Reverend Matthews performed a Christian ceremony while Walks with Wisdom blessed them according to Comanche tradition. Catherine wore a dress that combined elements of both cultures, white linen adorned with traditional Comanche beadwork that Red Morning had spent weeks creating as a wedding gift. Thomas attended reluctantly, still struggling to accept his sister's choice, but even he seemed moved by the genuine joy and hope that permeated the celebration. Chief Ironheart gave a speech that honored Catherine's courage and Thunderstrike's wisdom, declaring that their marriage proved that the future belonged not to those who clung to hatred, but to those brave enough to build bridges. As Catherine and Thunderstrike exchanged vows promising to honor and support each other through whatever challenges lay ahead, the assembled crowd from both San Angelo and the Comanche camp watched in respectful silence. When they sealed their union with a kiss, tentative applause began, growing stronger as people from both sides joined together in celebration of something that had seemed impossible just months before. The years that followed were not easy. Catherine and Thunderstrike faced ongoing prejudice from extremists on both sides who saw their marriage as an abomination. There were setbacks in the broader peace process, moments when violence seemed inevitable. But the foundation they had built proved resilient. The liaison system they had established evolved into a formal council with representatives from multiple frontier towns and Comanche bands, creating a regional framework for dispute resolution and cooperation. Catherine and Thunderstrike had 3 children who grew up fluent in both English and Comanche, comfortable in both worlds, living embodiments of the possibility of true integration. Their eldest daughter became a translator and mediator, continuing her parents' work of building understanding between communities. The old trading post, site of that first crucial council and their wedding, became a school where children from both cultures learned together, taught by teachers from both communities. It stood as a monument to what could be achieved when people chose dialogue over violence, understanding over hatred, and love over fear. On a warm evening many years later, Catherine and Thunderstrike sat on the porch of their home, built halfway between San Angelo and the Comanche camp, a location that symbolized their commitment to both worlds. Their hair was touched with silver now, their faces marked by years and experience, but their eyes still held the same determination and love that had brought them together. Thunderstrike took his wife's hand. The gesture as natural after all these years as breathing. Do you ever regret it, Catherine? The challenges you faced because you chose to love me? Catherine smiled and squeezed his hand. Not for a single moment. You and I, we've built something beautiful together. Not just our family, but a legacy of peace and cooperation that will outlive us both. That's worth any challenge, any sacrifice. I confronted your uncle that day not knowing if I would survive, and I found not just a path to peace, but my soulmate. How could I regret that? Thunderstrike pulled her close, and they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they both loved, the land they had worked so hard to make a place where all people could live in dignity and peace. The Merciless chief had stopped her without raising his voice, had listened to her words, and from that moment of courage and connection had come not just an agreement, but a love story that had changed the frontier forever.